Greetings, programs. This is Wretch. Welcome back to An English Haunting. And in the last episode, guys, we got ourselves a show. We were able to go in and watch Beatrice do her thing, and it was a very interesting show, complete with Houdini cameo. But afterward, we confronted her in her dressing room about her relationship with Professor Ward, and not only did she basically admit to everything, she wants to help us out. So we are here in Professor Ward's secret workshop, and we need to figure out what exactly is going on here. So let's go ahead and check the shelf first. The shelf is full of tools, but I don't see anything that could help me. Professor Ward's famous causistic archive. He used to have it in his office. Apparently he moved it here recently. I've spent a lot of time reading its files over and over. Wait, hold on a minute. I think he updated it with 4 new cases. They seem interesting, but I'm not sure if it's a good time to read them. The case of the haunted attic, the case of the voices from beyond, the case of Westminster Abbey, the case of the sheet ghost, aka the Scat Man. Mrs. M is a humble flower seller from Covent Garden, struggling to support her family, including 3 children and a husband unable to find work. Just a week ago, their greedy landlord raised the rent to an unaffordable amount. Oh, sounds like the current day. The family of 5 had to move to a small, dilapidated house on Cavell Street, previously occupied by an elderly couple who passed away a week before Mrs. M arrived. During their first nights in the new place, they heard 3 metallic knocks coming from the attic. Mr. M investigated, but couldn't find the source of the sounds. Frightened, they sought my services to explain this strange occurrence. That same night, I went to their home and waited downstairs for the knocks to happen again. As expected, 3 metallic knocks echoed from the attic floor. I went up, accompanied by a terrified Mr. M, but found nothing there. However, 3 large boxes stacked in a corner caught my attention. When I shone my lamp behind them, I was shocked to see a sight that will haunt me forever. A man around 40 years old, emaciated, chained to the wall by his ankles, devoid of tongue, eyes, and ears, surrounded by filth. Despite his condition, he somehow sensed my presence and struck the floor with a plate 3 times. Neighbors later identified this unfortunate soul as the son of the elderly couple, unseen since he was 15. It seems he had been living in that attic in such a deplorable state all those years. The reason for his horrific punishment by his own parents remains a mystery. But there is one thing I know for sure. The living are more feared than the dead. Or to be more feared. Yes, indeed. Good God. Voices from Beyond. Brian Stewart, a renowned psychiatrist and follower of Jean Martin Carcott, is a busy man reluctant to waste time writing up his research findings. To streamline this process, he uses a phonograph to record his notes for his assistant to transcribe later. He sought my help because strange, distant voices mysteriously appeared on one of the cylinders. Stewart played the recording for me, and after a brief silence of 2 or 3 seconds, I could hear them. They were nonsensical phrases, some whispered. Occasionally a word in Latin would emerge. After a long silence, the voice of the psychiatrist resumed dictation for his assistant. While it's uncommon for intermediate voices to manifest on a sound recording, this phenomenon is known as EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. I suggested an experiment to Stewart, leaving the phonograph alone in a room to record ambient sounds in the hope of capturing those voices again. We tried this, but the device picked up nothing. I speculated that the phenomenon might only occur in the psychiatrist's presence, so we repeated the experiment with Stewart speaking directly into the phonograph while I observed from a corner of the room. The esteemed psychiatrist, to avoid wasting another cylinder, used the recording to dictate notes on a case he'd been working on for weeks. He spoke continuously for several minutes until he abruptly stood up, pacing the room and whispering random phrases and paraphrasing lines from the book De Secretis Mulierium, oddly in Latin. I approached him and could see that he was in a catatonic state, or semi-catatonic. Another researcher might have concluded that the man was under possession of an entity from beyond, but I'm a professional. I examined him and confirmed that he exhibited all the symptoms of schizophrenia. I feel sorry for him, but I regret even more not having heard a real EVP. So these are his, almost got him cases, I guess. The case of Westminster Abbey. With great secrecy, I was led to Westminster Abbey by request of Bishop Thomas Stevens. I was told that the great organ built by William Hill in 1848 played each night by itself, without human intervention. The sacristan, Anthony Hoyle, suspected the culprit was the ghost of the old organist with whom they did not end up on good terms, as he was laid off due to his alcoholism. The new organist, Paul Latham, showed me what a work of art the instrument is, a hulk of tubes and pistons that extend up to the ceiling. Given my ignorance in these matters, I asked him if it was not possible that the air came through the tubes and made the instrument play. He said it would be possible, but not with enough strength to play as loudly as it did during the night. He added that what you could hear was no melody, but a string of distorted notes that made one's skin bristle. The organist offered a small snack in the form of an excellent wine and delicious Swiss cheese. I think I know what's about to happen here. Then asked me to attend his rehearsal, so that I could hear for myself the sound of the enormous instrument, and so that he could brag about his skill with the keyboard, I imagine. When he was finished, he asked me how I liked the piece he just played. I do not know a lot about music, so the only thing I told him was that he had some chunks of cheese in his bushy beard. He left annoyed, and I don't blame him. I'm aware that my social abilities leave much to be desired. I missed Patrick. My colleague knows how to connect with his fellow men. In the early hours during my watch, I was sitting in one of the seats closer to the organ when I heard a cacophony emanating from the instrument. They were right. No one was at the keyboard. The acoustics of the place made the sound resonate throughout the room, making anyone who heard it anxious to some degree. Thinking I could finally catch a ghost, I drew near to the organ and could see a tiny mouse running along the keys, eating the bits of Swiss cheese that laid on them. The organist received an ultimatum. Either he stopped eating cheese before rehearsing, or he shaved off his beard. He opted for the latter. Oh, wow. I know some folks who would swear off cheese to keep their beard. Sir Clarence Hoffman, the once famous theatrical author, required my services, as he had claimed several strange phenomena were happening in his house. The residence is near Piccadilly, and I will omit the street and number by express desire of his wife. Hoffman's tales was that, at midnight several times already, a figure had wandered through the corridors of the house. The story was corroborated by his servant, someone called Fritz Meyer. Mrs. Hoffman did not want to talk about it, though. Oh dear. Her husband excused her, explaining that it was hard for her to give any details about the phenomena, as a mere mention of them affected her nerves. Half an hour before midnight, I asked the inhabitants of the house to stay away from the area of the apparition's activity, which is the living room. 5 minutes before the clock struck 12, I stood in a corner of the main corridor so I could have a wide view. At 12 o'clock, I could see a dancing shadow on the far side of the corridor. I think we got a backdoor man here. I drew closer, hiding in the shadows so that I would not draw the attention of the phenomenon, until I realized it was a figure in a sheet with holes for the eyes. I pulled the sheet with outrage, and with a bit of curiosity about which member of the household was using such a trite trick to waste my time. Mrs. Hoffman arrived in a rush when she heard me scolding the German servant, and told me, with an embarrassment that made me sympathetic, that her husband missed the time when he was a regular in the newspapers, a time which, sadly, no one even remembered. Seeing that cases of apparitions featured prominently in the press each day, he plotted so the newspapers would draw their attention to him once more. He asked the servant to disguise himself as a ghost, so that a well-respected metapsychic investigator, that is me, would confirm the story to give it a luster of authenticity. What Sir Hoffman did not count on, however, was the wariness yours truly bears in on his back in matters of fraud and deception. I promised that the theatrical author would once again feature in the newspapers, this time in the role of a fraudster. But the insistent pleas of Mrs. Hoffman dissuaded me from taking this story, which she never agreed with, to the press. I'm exhausted. Sometimes I wonder if this is all worth it. I thought that the wife may have had a boyfriend. Okay, interesting. If I need a ladder, I'll know where to find one. Typical London weather. Fog banks and high concentrations of pollution. I want to save the workbench for last here. It will be left in the dark. This box is full of technical drawings. I'll take a closer look. Oh! It can't be! Beatrice. What have you found? Come take a look at this. Is this what I think it is? The box of revelations.
Nelson couldn't stop talking about it. High-tech machinery that can reveal the hidden.
A real-time viewer of the beyond. A fantasy. We theorized a lot about this device, but we gave up when we assumed it was impossible to build it with existing technology.
However, from what I see...
Yes, it seems the professor found the key. If we connect... Oh my god. Of course! It could work! Take a close look at this document.
I read designed by Professor Nelson Ward and Professor Patrick Moore.
Yes, the core part of this machine is based on my electromagnetic wave booster. Thanks to it, I've been able to contact Thomas Highmore at the old Benwell Street house.
There are several names associated with parts of the machine.
Let's take a look. Eugene Wood, Florence Cook, Professor Silas Bennett.
One of the pieces would fit into a side spring.
Eugene Wood.
Does that name ring a bell?
He's a renowned photographer specializing in post-mortem images.
Mourning portraits. Photographs of the deceased for their family's remembrance. I find it a distasteful practice. I hope they do not photograph me like that when I die. In fact, I have stated in my will that I want to be cremated and emptied down some drain. I hope my last wish is fulfilled.
I think that piece is a photographic plate. One of the functions of the Box of Revelations is to visually record the surroundings.
That tube is meant to contain ectoplasm, correct?
You're right. Since ectoplasm is the materialization of certain elements from beyond, we've theorized that if treated and enhanced, it could be a strong conduit for displaying that invisible reality. But Florence Cook? She's an even more fraudulent medium than you, if I may be so bold.
Florence Cook would manifest an entity called Katie King through her body. And yes, it was proven to be a fraud.
And the professor knew it. That's why I'm concerned about entrusting the collection of ectoplasm to Florence Cook.
This here, it's a geometric figure.
This space is intended for the machine's generator. For the Box of Revelations to be autonomous, we needed significant power. We conducted several tests synthesizing and miniaturizing various generators. We were unsuccessful. It was one of the reasons we couldn't carry out a prototype.
However, it seems that Nelson found an alternative.
There's no doubt about it. But I don't know what that figure could be.
Professor Silas Bennett. Who are we talking about?
Silas Bennett is a reputable yet eccentric archaeologist. He spends much of his time searching for artifacts out of time and place. This has led to a rather dubious reputation.
Artifacts out of time and space and time? Or place and time?
UPARTs. That's what they call them. It's an acronym for out-of-place artifact. Fascinating.
The Box of Revelations is a reality. It can be made.
With those 3 missing pieces and relying on the professor's judgment, yes.
Do you know what this means, dear friend? Thanks to it, you'll be able to prove to those skeptics on the board that you were right.
What am I saying? To those skeptics?
To the whole world. Come with me. This device caught my attention, but I didn't know what it was until I saw the plan for the Box of Revelation.
Yes, indeed. It appears to be a prototype of sorts.
Let's see what you think of my proposal. I've noticed some missing adjustments and some elements that could be improved. I could take care of that while you get the missing pieces.
But what about the professor? Should we suspend our search?
We're at a dead end. We can waste time wandering around London, or we can save your department at the university. We'll worry about Nelson later. Something tells me he'll show up eventually. Well, what do you say?
Well, if the machine works, we can try it at Benwell Street. So count on it.
Excellent. Let's recap. We need an ectoplasm sample. Nelson pinned his hopes on Florence Cook. I have doubts about this matter. It's well known that Florence Cook was a fraud. It's also well known that Nelson is the most skeptical investigator in all of England. Trust him. Nelson must know something we don't. All right. Where can we find Florence Cook nowadays? She's still conducting spiritualist sessions. She has her cabinet on Lockhill Lane. Neat. Well, I'll head there. Professor Silas Bennett is the key to making the machine autonomous. An archaeologist, not an engineer. I wonder how he can help us. We'll have to ask him. Do you know where we can locate him? Yes, he has an office at the London Archaeological Society. And last but not least, we have Eugene Wood, a photographer. The machine can photographically record its surroundings, and that compartment in it seems intended for a photographic plate. But not just any photographic plate. If it were, Nelson wouldn't have had trouble finding one. Well, I'll pay Bennett a visit and we'll find out.
So many things.
Very well, Professor Moore. Pay a visit to those people. Meanwhile, I'll work on the machine adjustments. Bring me the pieces as you acquire them. There's no time to waste. Let's get to it.
So, in terms of our resources here, we've got a ladder if we need it. We may have to come back here to the filing cabinet to look at some stuff.
I should let Beatrice work. She knows what she's doing.
And hopefully will not swerve us.
It looks like a high-powered electric generator. Why would the professor need such wattage?
Gigawatts! Or gigawatts. Oh, look at all this. Okay. Well, I guess we could just work our way across. Let's head see Florence Cook. Florence Cook herself, for example. She was studied by several researchers. Those who certified her as a fraud belonged to the London intellectual elite. Several of them affiliated with the Conservative Party. Believe me, Mr. Taylor, when I say that our leaders are not interested in us being aware of the truth. I'm not saying it as a conspiracy. But it is a conspiracy. Ah, good afternoon. You're part of the group, I assume.
Excuse me?
The advertisement.
I beg your pardon?
I placed an advertisement in the British Association of Supernatural Studies newsletter seeking people to join me at Mrs. Cook's session. Only Mr. Morton and Mr. Taylor responded to the call. Tell me, did you also come because of the advertisement?
Yes or no? Yes, of course.
Ah, I'm glad. I'm Joseph Brown.
Patrick Moore.
Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Moore. You don't have to worry about money. As I mentioned in the advertisement itself, it's all paid for.
I appreciate that.
I hope you don't think Katie King's a fraud, as they have tried to make us believe.
Well, I suppose we'll soon find out.
Yes, of course. That's the idea. Oh.
Gentlemen, Miss Cook informs me she's ready. Remember to remain silent throughout the session. It is of the utmost importance that no matter what happens, and no matter what you see, you do not leave your seat.
Will we see Katie King?
I cannot ensure that. But it seems that this evening the medium's spiritual energies are in full swing. So, your wish will probably come true.
Fascinating.
If you would be kind enough to join me.
Are you nervous, Mr. Moore?
Oh yes, I'm shaking all over.
I can offer you an opiate to calm your nerves. I usually carry some with me for medicinal purposes. But promise me you won't tell anyone. It won't be necessary. Shall we go in? Yes, of course. Another seance, eh?
I suppose my niece has informed you of the guidelines to follow during this session. Know that communication with the spirit world is very delicate. An unexpected event could result in the loss of connection with the beyond. Therefore, allow me to remind you of what must not forget while the medium is in a trance. You cannot rise from your seat once the session has begun. If Katie King were to manifest, do not speak to her. She cannot see or hear you. She will only communicate through me. She is quite sensitive to what happens in the world, so try not to make any sudden moves. She could get scared and disappear. If you wish to convey a message to her, address it to me. Even while I'm in a trance, I will be able to hear you and transmit your words. Has everyone understood? Any questions or doubts before we begin?
Do we have to put our hands on the table during the session?
Do you have psychic powers, Mr. Brown?
Me? No. I don't have any.
Then let the medium be the one to place her hands on the table to channel psychic energies, alright?
Yes, of course.
Let's begin. Katie King, daughter of John King. You who left this life to join the world of the dead. You have been living in the shadows ever since. I summon you, O wandering spirit. Let us witness your presence in this world to which unfortunately you no longer belong. Leave the darkness and join the living.
Well then.
Florence? Is that you, Florence?
Amazing!
I am here, Katie King. The sound of my voice will guide you to me. Join us.
The researchers were right. The manifestation emanates the scent of flowers.
I feel life in this place. You are not alone. No, dear. I am accompanied by people who have come to see you. Who are they? I cannot see them, only feel them. Mr. Brown is with me on my right. Opposite me sit Mr. Morton and Mr. Taylor. And finally, Mr. Moore is on my left. Nice to meet you, gentlemen. Katie says she is pleased to meet you.
We can hear her.
Unbelievable. Katie King must be using all of her energy to communicate with this reality. Katie. Yes, Florence? My guest informed me that they can hear your voice. That is wonderful. Can I convey a message to them? Of course, dear. You are blessed to live in a world that, while not perfect, is full of wonders. Where I come from, there is nothing. Everything is dark. It is a lonely place. He's dead. Do not waste your lives on conflicts. Avoid problems. Live your lives as if each day was the last. Those are very beautiful words, dear. Does anyone wish to ask Katie King a question?
Oh. I didn't get a chance to. Gentlemen, Katie King exists. The session has been a success. We should celebrate. I know an exquisite restaurant not far from here. What do you think about going to the Regent Street Smokers Club instead? Good option, Mr. Morton. I know a brothel that... Mr. Tyler's option. You've heard Katie King. We must live life. Let's get moving, gentlemen. Cogswallop.
This session is over, Mr. Moore. Do you need anything else? You were Katie King, weren't you? No, I don't know what you're talking about. You just had to change clothes and appear from the shadows. My good sir, I don't know what you're aiming at, but I beg you to leave. Forgive me, but my intention is not to cause trouble. My name is Patrick Moore. I'm a university professor. I'm involved in metapsychic research, along with my colleague Nelson Ward. Oh no, not again. I'd hoped I would never hear that name again in my life. I'm confused. Did you have trouble with my colleague? I will tell you the same thing I told Professor Ward. You will not get the ectoplasm sample at the expense of my aunt's life. So you can... Enough, Charlotte. But Aunt Florence, I said enough. I've made a decision. If you'd be so kind as to step aside, I need to speak with this gentleman. So you work with Professor Ward? That's correct. And where is he? I have no idea where he might be. Has he disappeared? Yes, something like that. I've taken over his research. If it's all right with you, let's get this conversation in order. My colleague left a note saying you could provide an ectoplasm sample. That is correct. I do not mean to be rude, but I believe he made a mistake in thinking you'd be the right person for the job. Your reputation is questionable, Miss Cook. And what I saw in there confirms it. Forget what you've seen. Anyone except the group you came with would know it's a crude setup. But Professor Nelson has a memory. It is something that is sadly lacking in all those who hear the name Florence Cook for the first time. What do you mean? I've not always been a fraud, Mr. Moore. When I was just a teenager, I contacted an entity who called himself Sergeant Hughes. I managed to materialize ectoplasm through my body, and this entity used it to communicate with me. I thought it was a good way to make a living. And it was, for the first few weeks. But with each session, Sergeant Hughes gained more strength to the point of possessing my body. He became more and more violent. His intention was to invade this reality, a reality to which he did not belong. I managed to sever the link, but his last words were a threat. A death threat. It was then that I created Katie King. A contrivance, of course, but safer, without risking my life. People didn't care. They were still amazed by the sessions. Since then, there had been several Katie Kings. I was the first, but logically, I had to stay young. The latest Katie King, as you've seen, is my niece Charlotte. Do you understand now, Mr. Moore? My aunt can't do what you're asking. She could die if she invoked Sergeant Hughes. I'm sorry I was unaware of all this. It's not my intention to put you in danger. That doesn't matter now. I am sick, Mr. Moore. Very sick. I've been given up on. Doctors have diagnosed that I have no more than 2 months left to live. I want to do it. I don't want to leave this life without the world knowing that I was never a fraud. So you're in luck. You will have your ectoplasm sample. I believe your niece is right. Invoking that entity could... It is my will. and you must respect it.
I want that sample more than anything in this world, but I'm also concerned about your safety. And I would like to have a clear conscience.
You will. As I said, this is what I want. Mind you, I'm not going to summon the bastard without the presence of William Crooks.
Crooks? The scientist who discovered the element thallium?
Among other things, yes. When my name and Katie King's became famous, several researchers wanted to verify the authenticity of the phenomenon. One of them was a promising scientist and a member of the Royal Society. He validated the phenomenon. He knew it was all a hoax, but he didn't want to discredit me in society's eyes. He was criticized and almost discredited as a scientist. I'd like to have him at the session. I have a lot to say to him. He was an important person in my life. Although I doubt he'll accept the invitation if my niece or I reach out to him. Tell me, Mr. Moore, can you get Mr. Crooks to come? Know that I won't lift a finger without his attendance. Yes, I'll try. He resides in Berkeley Square. Ask any coachman nearby and they'll tell you where to find him. Bringing Mr. Crooks here, and we can start the session. In the meantime, I'll begin the preparations.
And writing up like a last will and testament. Goodness.
Do you know that your selfishness will make my aunt die? Forget it. I'm outnumbered. I cannot fight against your greed and my aunt's stubbornness. May God's will be done.
Ooh, and now we can look through all the things. Alright guys, interesting. Well, we may get the ectoplasm, but the cost of a woman's life, but we'll see where the other places will take us in the next episode. Hope y'all have enjoyed it. If you liked the episode, please leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, that'd be a big help. And we'll see you next time. Later days, everyone.